Hey guys, to help run the forums, host the website, and travel, we've introduced a universal service fee for in-depth coverage, including this video. The goal is to be transparent and unbiased. This is not an endorsement. It's a privilege to serve you. Let's get into it.
Hey, what's going on, guys? So I am here at the Sea Otter Classic show checking out the Gepida Fastida. Yes, that's the name of this bike. It's a high-speed Bosch-powered commuter with some really cool commuter accessories already on the bike. Let's go ahead and check it out. All right, so this is the bike, of course, and not too far beyond that hill over there, we have announcements for some bike races that are coming up, or that are happening right now. So bear with me while we get through the announcements that are coming through the loudspeakers. Okay, so this is the Gepida Fastida. This is a really cool commuter bike that is powered by the Bosch Performance line Speed, and it has a lot of really cool accessories on it from the get-go, from the factory, to help you get up and get out and get riding pretty much as quick as possible. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the mechanical components, and then we'll get into the accessories, and then finally the electric system. So what you have on the brakes is honestly one of my favorite mechanical components on this bike. You have a set of hydraulic disc brakes from Magura, and I've never been able to ride a bike like this long term because I wind up with other bikes, and I haven't had a set of brakes like these, and I'm jealous. Every time I ride them, I press on the brakes, and boy, I wish I had those brakes for my very own, because these are nice. They have really good stopping power, and they are both set up to 180 millimeter rotors on the front and also on the rear. So it has a lot of bite to it, as well as offering a pretty good surface area for heat dissipation if you go down a pretty heavy hill. Anyways, talking about the brakes, you can go down a pretty steep hill, such as this hill that I just came down. So this is a pretty steep hill that goes all the way up to the raceway over there, and you can kind of get an idea for how steep it is because you can see these very skilled cyclists going at a slower pace up the hill. I wish I had those kind of legs sometimes, but I ride too many electric bikes. So going back to the bicycle itself, so the brakes are honestly one of my favorite things about the mechanical system on this bike, but the rest of the bike has some familiar components that are likewise really good. You have a Shimano Dior indexer up here with the trigger shifters if you want to increase or decrease the amount of force that you have to put onto the pedals, and that comes all the way back down here to the Shimano XT derailleur. And this is a really good derailleur. I like it a lot. It's very quick. It indexes very, very well. I like it a lot. And that, of course, comes back into the 10-speed gears that you have here, protected by this cute little plastic plate. Heaven forbid you get the inside of your spokes dirty. Speaking of which, these are some pretty good 13-gauge spokes that are black with silver screws that come in here. Schrader valve, which is actually pretty interesting. A lot of times when you get a bike like this that is kind of tailored for the European market, they wind up having Presta valves from the get-go. So these Schrader valves are actually pretty neat because you can use these to fill up at a gas station or a pump, and you don't have to get special adapters or anything like that. You can just kind of jump on the bike, put some air in the tires, and get going without having to get any kind of special equipment. So that's the shifter, that's the brakes, and we talked a little bit about the wheels, but the tires actually have some pretty cool features in themselves. So these are the e-bike specific Schwalbe Energizer Plus. These are a really good set of tires that have a fair amount of comfort to them, a fairly wide width to them, but they are made specifically for electric bikes that go a little bit faster and a little bit heavier than traditional bikes. As well, they have a reflective sidewall on the tire itself, which is nice because if you didn't know, a lot of bike accidents happen from the side of the bike, and so having some kind of reflection, some kind of representation if you're riding at night is fantastic. Along with these really big reflectors that you have that are mounted onto the mounts for the fender. These are some nice big reflectors that you have on both sides. Unfortunately, the back of the bike doesn't have any side representation, but then again, you got a lot more already than most bicycles have just with the wheels and just with those big plates on there. So yeah, thumbs up for that one. Thumbs up for safety, the #1 priority. So alongside with that, you have a front fork right here. This is a SR Sun Tour front fork, QSP, that has about 80 millimeters of travel right here. And you have a lockout right here if you just want to go stiff. And you also have a preload adjustment on the other side of the fork if you wanted to change just how much spring or how much stiffness you get inside of the shock there. So anything else mechanical that we want to talk about is more or less an accessory, because there's lots of accessories to talk about on this bike. So let's go ahead and jump into that. So you have a lot of commuting accessories on here. We kind of mentioned the fenders very briefly that mount onto the fork itself and also onto the crown of the fork up here. These are some plastic fenders which are pretty lightweight, and they also have the mud guard on both the front and the rear. And with these fenders, they also have a little skid plate right up here on top, and it mounts into this apparatus which has the front light. You can see that that front light is pretty powerful. If we turn the entire bike on, then the lights come on from the get-go. You don't have to press a button to turn on the lights. They're always on, which is kind of a European preference. But it's a pretty bright light, even in the broad daylight here in California next to the coast without a cloud in the sky. Well, there's a couple clouds. You can still see it, which is already, you know, heads and tails above most everything else that I've seen. On this same mount that you have for the light, which by the way is integrated into the main battery pack, so you don't have to switch out any batteries or anything like that. On this mount you also have this, and usually a reflector goes in this place, and it's kind of, you know, roundish and has those spots in it, but this is actually a horn. Let's press the button. So that's a very, very noticeable horn on the bike, and this is honestly one of the first times I've seen a horn on an electric bicycle by default. I've seen them sold as an add-on accessory. I don't think I've even seen them as an accessory from the factory, but these ones come on the bike from the get-go. I guess that's that's somewhat redundant, but it also has a bell on the bike. So I suppose if you want to tell someone politely, "Excuse me, I'm coming through," you would ring the bell. And if you want to tell someone, "Hey, yo, move out the way," you got the horn. So that's a pretty interesting thing on this bike. Another good commuting accessory that you have on the bike, along with the lights while we're talking about it, you have a light in the back of the bike back here. And so this is a static light that's always on this little like this kind of like eyebrow looking thing right there. And these two lights right here are connected to the brakes. So when you pull on the brakes, just like a car, these brake lights will light up, and it's pretty cool. Let's see if I can maneuver the camera a little bit, dance around, and I'll show you those lights in action. So yeah, so that's pretty cool. Also, yet again, you have another light right here. This is the little light that sticks out on this nose here. And if you kind of, you know, poke up the nose a little bit, this light is actually mounted on the license plate mount. So if you wish, or if you're required to, you can get a license plate to mount onto here, and you have a little light to illuminate that. And this all comes like this from the factory. So these aren't any additional accessories that you have to order. This is how the bike comes for the MSRP. As well, let's kind of mention this rack. This is a pretty good rack that has a max load of 25 kilograms, and it has the small, kind of like the small railing on here, which is nice because the small railing can accommodate a lot of different pannier bags. It's common for pannier bags to have a relatively small hook that can get onto a relatively small, like this size, of a rail. Every now and again you see an electric bike that has a very fat railing system, and that's great for carrying heavy cargo like a box or a child, but when you have to get pannier bags on them, those wider rims on the railing can kind of like make the bags not as stable when you mount them on there. So this is set up for commuting. I doubt anyone's going to carry much more than a single kid on this at most. So that's actually a really good thing that they've designed on the bike. And so last but not least, let's talk about some of the electric system. I guess we can kind of go over a couple of the touch points on this bike. It does have some platform pedals with reflectors, government mandated reflectors, but it also has this little padding on the pedal that can help you kind of get grip with your feet when you're getting on and off the bike, or if you're at a stoplight, which is pretty common for commuter bikes. You do have a solid seat post right here and a pretty high angle for stepping over. I don't know if they have a step-through model, but this one is the 52 centimeter height for the bicycle, but you can also get a 56 centimeter if you're a little bit taller. And let's see, going up to the solid seat post right here, you have a pretty good gel seat from Cell Royale. It's a nice seat, especially given the profile. It's not terribly tall, but it does provide some good cushion, which is nice. Also, another touch point up here is the grips have a little bit of an ergonomic flair to them. These aren't lock-on grips. These grips are actually friction mounted. So if you give them some guts, you can actually kind of twist them a little bit. But that's more than you probably do on your regular ride. So these are some pretty good grips to put on here. Kind of talked about the bell. You do have a little bit of a rise rise in the stem here. It's not much. The stem doesn't come completely straight out. It kind of angles just a hair, just a little bit. And with the slight rise that you have in the handlebars right here, they kind of come up just a tiny bit. So the seating position on this bike is definitely forward. I would definitely say that someone riding this bike would have most of their weight in the front of the bike, which is normal for commuting and especially at a higher speed. But if you're looking for a bike that's totally made for comfort, then this one wouldn't be my first choice. So up here on the control switch, we'll kind of go over the display really quick in case this is your first time checking it out. This is the Bosch Performance Speed motor. And the Bosch system has been around for quite a while. It's been around for a few years. The speed models have been out for not as much time, but they are certainly well proven. They can put out a great amount of power, up to 28 miles an hour assistance. And then past that point, the bike just kind of lets you pedal on your own. So it's not going to throw you off or anything like that, but it does cut off the power as you're reaching 28 miles an hour. And it feels really good. If you haven't tried a Bosch system, I definitely recommend going to a local shop, trying it out, see if you like it, because it's one of the leaders in the industry, and there's a really good reason why. So with the Bosch Performance Line Speed, this of course is the mid-drive motor, and the battery is also mounted here, which, by the way, this is a 500 watt-hour pack, one of the larger packs available on the bike. And having all the weight right here in the middle is really good for balance, really good for balance. So let's talk about the display. That's kind of how we started this. So on the display, you have the Intuvia screen, or like a display right here in the middle, as well as the remote attachment on the left-hand side, and also this horn. That horn is kind of an additional thing. That's not about the Bosch system in particular. I just like it. So with this system, you have a basic on-off switch that's really simple, easy to use. Bam, one button on, one button off. It boots up a little bit and it shows you a couple of things. You have a variable display right here with the black background, and as you press the I, as an information button, it will scroll through a few parameters in order. So you have the odometer, the trip set, the clock, the max speed, your average speed, trip time, and a range estimate. Right now the range estimate says nothing because we haven't started pedal assist. In the top right of the screen, you have this graph that scales up with pedal assist. Right now it's in the off mode. As you press the plus button, then pedal assist will begin, and it'll be in a smaller mode called Eco. The names are a little bit finicky between one bike or another because they program them slightly different between bike models and especially between companies. But nonetheless, Eco is the first level of pedal assist. And then when you press the plus button, it will assist you a little bit more as you pedal, and then more and then more. So finally you get up to turbo mode. Now you'll notice that when I increased the pedal assist level, the range estimate got lower. That's because if you have the bike in eco mode, that's using the battery, somewhat sparingly. And as you increase the level up to turbo, then you're using the most of the battery that it has to offer. This range estimate, in my experience, is somewhat conservative. So right now it says 15 miles. I would honestly guess somewhere close to, I don't know. If you're an experienced cyclist, you could probably get double out of that, probably triple. But if you are kind of new into cycling, kind of getting into it again, like a lot of us, myself included a few years ago, then that estimate is still a little conservative. Kind of take it with a grain of salt, because you're going to experience different roads, different terrain as a different rider with a different bicycle. But nonetheless, I wouldn't be scared by these numbers. These are not matter of fact. These are estimates nonetheless. And anyways, continuing on, it goes back to the odometer. This bike does have a switch for the light, but the lights are always on, whether you press it or whether you don't press it. There is also a reset button, and of course the information button is also mirrored on the remote switch right there. So that covers the mechanical, the electrical, the accessories. Let's go ahead and jump on the bike and take it for a ride. I've got the bike in turbo mode, and we are going for it. Got some really good shifting from the Shimano XT. It's one of my favorites. I like it a lot. Oh yes, let's go. Let's go climb up this hill. Maybe we'll get to the campground area. Nobody's coming. We're good. Woo-hoo. All right, let's kick it. All right, we're past 20. We're up to about 22, 23. All right, the hill's coming up. I think we're at about 25 miles an hour. Okay. Up comes the hill. So yeah, this is a really hilly area, so it's tough to kind of get a a good stretch on the flat land, but it'll have to do. I love a high-speed commuter, I really do. And one thing I really like about this bike is going downhill. I didn't have as much of an opportunity to show you because it's kind of a precarious position to be in, to be filming while you're rolling downhill and kind of holding the camera up like so. I'll definitely rely on some of the mounted camera footage to show you the bike going downhill, because it does very well downhill, and I like that. And that's account of the brakes and also the riding position and the comfort that you have on some of these touch points. Gives you a little bit more confidence as you're going down. So even a pretty steep hill like this, you can still get some good speed and still feel pretty confident as you're riding around. So I like it. But as you're riding the bike, the speed system kind of has a really smooth ramp to it as you're coming up to about, say, 25, 26 or so. It's quite predictable. It's quite nice. When you get up to about like 26 and a half, you know, getting close to 28, that's when the system doesn't help you as much. And so it has kind of like a different riding profile, if you want to call it that. This is just my perception of it. It feels like to actually get to the 28 miles an hour, if you're riding on the flat, you got to give it a little guts. And I suppose that's not a bad thing, because it is a top speed. You know, it's not like a required speed. It's not like the speed limit on the road where it says, you know, speed limit 55. That means everybody goes at least 55. It's not quite like that. The 28 miles an hour, that's the top speed that the system will help. And, you know, it kind of lets you know. So one thing I forgot to mention when I was going over the mechanical details, at least I didn't put too much detail into it, was the retractable kickstand, the spring-loaded kickstand. It actually has a really nice touch when you want to get up and get moving immediately, when you want to just jump on the bike and go right away. However, when you're maneuvering that thing in and out of the garage, the kickstand springs up. And so if you're doing any work on the bike, standing up with the kickstand makes it really difficult. If you're trying to put some air in the tires or something like that, you'll want to like prop it up on something else. Honestly, those kickstands are kind of a pain, and it is, you know, one of the choices that they made on this bike that personally I wouldn't have if I were designing this bike. It has a lot of really great features to it, a lot of really good accessories, but that kickstand is really the only thing that's it's kind of like a question mark in my book. I really do appreciate the bottle cage bosses that they have on the bike. That's actually something that's missing from a lot of electric bikes that we really like. Okay guys, thanks for checking out the Gepida Fastida with me. It's a really cool, fast commuter bike with lots of really good stuff on it. I like it a lot. If you want to compare this with other electric bikes that have similar setups, such as like the Gazelle Citizen, I think T10 is the old one. The Gazelle Citizen, that's another one that kind of fits into this category. If you want to compare this bike, the Gepida Fastida, with that and others, please go to ElectricBikeReview.com, where you can see the full write-up and the full specs on this bike and a whole lot more. You can also participate in the forums where we hang out there sometimes if you have a question about this or other electric bikes or just electric bikes in general. So thanks for watching, guys. Ride safe.